There's a rumor flying around that Kalani Sitake could be taking the Penn State job. What would his departure from BYU mean for the Utah Utes? We're going to tell you on this episode of Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Huge shout out to our everydayers, and also just a huge shout out to all of you who have made the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. My name is JT Wistrcill, excited to be joined on today's show by Alex Napoles of KSL Sports. And Alex, we got a packed show to talk about. We're going to talk about Utes CFP chances. Not the greatest, but we'll still talk about them. Kyle Whittingham's legacy, because with everything going on with Lane Kiffin, I think it's worth revisiting how lucky we are to have a guy like Kyle Whittingham. But first, we got to start with this crazy news that Kalani Sitake could be leaving for the BYU job. There's been a lot of different people out there saying things about it, but one of the most interesting ones was Jason Shear of Wildcats Authority, who put out the hot rumor at Penn State. This comes to us from his ex, has been DeBoer and Sitake. Either hire would be insane. And there's just been a ton of noise right now. Alex Markham of Ute Nation has talked about this a little bit too, that, hey, there's a lot going on. Like he's just said, hey, there's some stuff coming out of BYU too. I've heard Penn State really wants him. We've heard Steve Bartle of KSL Sports even said like it could just be a crazy 24, 48 hours, not specifically talking about Utah, but there's just a lot of noise going on right now. If Sitake were to leave BYU, this would have a massive ripple effect on Utah, Alex.
It absolutely would. And first and foremost, I want to preface all this by saying that, one, I'm a massive, massive fan of Kalani Sitake and the work that he's been able to do at BYU, navigating them through independence, bouncing back after a slow start in the Big 12, and now on the brink of a Big 12 championship. They'll play for that this weekend. He's done a phenomenal job in recruiting. He's done a phenomenal job of building that program. He has set the attitude, the tone. He is the very fabric of BYU football. And so, first of all, if he does leave, I think that would be a massive, massive loss for BYU.
Yeah. It would be a huge loss for them. And I echo everything you said. Like, I'm a huge Sitake fan. I think he's one of the, I've said for a little bit, I think another job should try and get him. Now, you want to leave BYU. Like, BYU is a really good job now in the NIL era, especially what they've been able to do. So that's where this becomes interesting. So you're probably sitting there going, well, how does this affect Utah? Well, number one, it's our rival. So if they lose Sitake, I think he's a good coach. It's not a guarantee they get someone better. Someone's probably sitting over there going, well, they'll just get Jay Hill. I'm Penn State, and they seem to have pretty good pockets. I might want to make sure Jay Hill's coming along with him too, because part of the biggest reasons BYU has made this leap is not just what a good coach Sitake is, but Jay Hill as well too. I think Roderick would probably head on his way too. I think Penn State has the money to bring all those guys in. So where does the ripple effect come into Utah? Well, if Sitake leaves, not only number one, would it probably weaken BYU for a couple of years? I think it would. Maybe it wouldn't. We'd see. But I think the biggest thing, Alex, is absolutely recruiting. I think you have a lot of the guys in the state of Utah that probably just narrowly chose a BYU over a Utah. You get a new coaching change like that, I think we'd see a lot of Utah BYU players actually transfer to Utah if there was a shakeup. So that would be massive if Utah could get some of the local recruits and talent that go, you know what, it's close, but I'm going to lean BYU. The coach I committed to is left, because players, for the most part, yes, some will go to BYU regardless, some will go to Utah regardless, but for the most part, you commit to coaches in today's college football era. If the coach who recruited you leave, there's definitely a chance that those guys could be like, well, I really like the Utah guys. They're still there, even if it is a Morgan, as we said, with Witt potentially leaving. So I think there's absolutely a chance that Utah could end up getting some BYU players to transfer over to them if Sitake and his staff do head over to Penn State.
Absolutely. You look at the just see up in this upcoming class, in the 2026 class, you look at the top 5 recruits, and 3 of them are committed to BYU at this moment. But as far as local players go, right, from the state of Utah, but those are still all 4-star talent. Those are guys that are really, really great football players who have very, very high ceilings, who can be very, very good for any program. And so I think that's the first thing you're thinking of for if you're a Utah fan and you're watching this all unfold, and Kalani Sitake does decide to take the Penn State job. I think that's the first thing you're looking at is the in-state recruiting and getting potential opportunities to flip the top talent in this state. That's probably the biggest ripple effect will have for Utah in the short term. In the long run, obviously, there's a lot of variables. Obviously, it depends a lot on who replaces Kalani Sitake and who takes that head coaching job. But I think just looking at it from the minor picture, like you mentioned it, a lot of players these days it feels like they commit to the coach, not a program. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with some of the top recruits in the state who have committed to BYU. Do they decide to continue to keep that commitment to BYU, or is that an opportunity for Utah to swoop in and potentially make some flips?
It'd be really interesting to see what a Jay Hill would do. Maybe he would just stay and be the head coach there, but being a DC of a team with a chance to win a national championship. And yes, I know BYU only has one loss. They're right there in that sense. And I actually think BYU at this point in the season, looking at the body of work they put together, I think they belong in the CFP field. But I also I just don't see this team winning a national title. I can also just say, you have a better chance to win a national title at Penn State than BYU. That's what the history has shown us overall. We'll see if that changes, but that's what the history has shown us. So there's definitely a chance that Jay Hill would just stay and be like, you know what, I can be the head coach here. We're really winning. We're building something that could maybe become a national title contender rather than me just being the DC at one. What do you think Jay Hill would do if Kalani Sitake left? Do you think he'd stay?
I think selfishly, I would like for him to stay, just because I think that Jay Hill, he's a big part. I think he's a big fabric as to why that BYU team has been so successful, and I think that they can continue to find similar success, if not just as great success under a head coach Jay Hill than they would, as you see now with the head coach Kalani Sitake. And I think that he would be a phenomenal hire for that program. But at the same time, like you mentioned, one, you have the potential of a national championship. If you head to Penn State, right, you play your cards right, you can build a national contender there. With Penn State, with their resources and with the Big Ten backing you, man, that would be a place where you can build a national championship culture. But I don't know. I think it depends on the money, man. It depends on the money. We'll see what people decide, who decides what. We'll see if Jay Hill decides to go or stay. And like I said, though, I think he'd be a perfect candidate to replace Kalani.
A reminder of how deep Penn State's pockets are too. Yeah. I don't think they would pay Jay Hill more as the DC than he would as the head coach of BYU. There's a world it's close. I'm just going to say, they're paying Jim Knowles a lot of money right now. I also don't know how that whole deal would work. The former Ohio State defensive coordinator, who's currently the DC there right now. And Penn State is late in the game, so they're not desperate, because I don't want to make it sound like Sitake's a reach of a hire, because he's a really good coach. But it's just also the fact, a lot of the best, I think they at first wanted a Lane Kiffin, some of these other guys, and obviously they didn't get him. So it's been an interesting ripple effect that has gotten to Penn State too. But the other thing that'd be really interesting about this, if Kalani did leave, and maybe even if a lot of his assistants went with him, it's sounding more and more each day, right? Like it's going to be, this was Kyle Whittingham's last year. It's starting to feel like that is what's happening based on some reports we've seen and just how last year ended, and coming back wanting to go on a high note. He's going to do that. No Big 12 title, no CFP, probably all that, but still a high note. It would be actually pretty nice for Morgan Scalley if instead of, hey, your first rivalry game against BYU, it's a BYU team that is coming off back-to-back 10-win seasons, and they still will be, but if the coaching and the culture's there different, that could probably be something that's nice for Morgan Scalley too, right? Going against a little bit of a new look BYU team, and could probably help him try to start 1-0 and finally break this streak, right? If he's facing a team that has a new culture coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'd be fun for both teams at the same time to turn the page into a new era. Both teams would be starting off with new head coaches. Both teams would be starting off with a fresh slate. And I think from the neutral fan perspective, I think that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun. And, I mentioned new eras. We could be getting one, as we just talked about, with Morgan Scalley taking over. But with this whole mess that just happened with Lane Kiffin, it leaves me, and I know we just got through Thanksgiving, but it just makes me even more thankful, more grateful for Kyle Whittingham. What do I mean by that? I'm going to tell you in one moment. This episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at GameTime. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the GameTime app is clutch, finally giving fans the real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With GameTime, you can track prices that drop at real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup incredibly realistic instead of impossible. I mean, you get prices including fees up front, which I love. I mean, no last second surprises at checkout. Like, hey, where's this convenience fee coming from? GameTime lets you know where all of that stuff is at. Also, the seat view feature is a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. You could take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All caps, no spaces for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All caps, no spaces for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download GameTime today. College football has been a mess for a little bit, but I don't know if anything outside of maybe the Nico transfer when he left the Tennessee program for UCLA, I don't know if anything personifies what a mess this sport can be sometimes than Lane Kiffin leaving an Ole Miss team and program right now in the midst of a playoff run to go start over with an LSU team that isn't even ranked right now. And we could talk about what LSU is at its power versus Ole Miss. Like, it's just crazy to think he would do that. And amidst all this chaos, as I'm watching this cycle play out where, we're all just waiting to see what Lane's going to do, I'm just so thankful for the 22 years that Kyle Whittingham has given to Utah football. The fact that he stayed and helped lead this program, even stayed when he could have left for an SEC team. We'll talk about that a little more in a moment. But Alex, in an era where we see so many coaches hop, and let's be honest, none of them are able to really leave their school on good terms. Like, just makes me so grateful that we had a coach who really wanted to be a Utah man through and through, and he was that. And the Utah era that it seemed could be coming to a close with Witt potentially stepping away. Like, let's not forget, I know Utah, like we said, they didn't hit their goal. Kyle Whittingham has 8-10 win seasons. That is incredibly hard to do in college football. The longevity is unheard of in this sport, and I'm just so grateful that Kyle Whittingham has helped transform this Utah football program.
Yeah, that's a loyalty you can't buy these days, I mean, and Lane Kiffin's a perfect example of just what the world of college football seems to be becoming. Obviously, it's not the first time Kiffin has left a job in bad terms, right, to move on somewhere else. He's done it again, but this time I feel like it's a little bit different because for as long as I can remember, JT, Ole Miss was irrelevant. Ole Miss wasn't, there weren't anything in the SEC, and Lane Kiffin took that job in 2020 in that COVID year. Took him 5-5 that first season, but then has slowly built up the program. And now they're SEC contenders, right? It's a school that's never made the championship game, but they're still in the mix of being one of the better teams in the SEC. And that's a lot of credit to Lane Kiffin, the recruiting that he's done and building the program up the way that he has. And somebody comes in with a quote unquote better job, better paying money and buys the loyalty, right? And now his loyalty and his allegiances changed to LSU. It seems that's happened it's happening time and time again. It's happening over and over again. And I feel like if you're a Utah fan, you have to be grateful for what Kyle Whittingham has done with this program and his loyalty to stay with this program and continue to build what he's been building for the last 21 years, man.
It's been incredible. And it's funny, like we just mentioned Lane Kiffin left an SEC job for an SEC job. Well, Kyle Whittingham actually almost left Utah for an SEC job way back then, because you just mentioned Lane Kiffin's had some ugly exits. In 2010, Lane Kiffin left Tennessee to go to USC. And what did that leave? A vacancy, of course, with the Volunteers. Who was one of the people they reached out to? Kyle Whittingham, all the way back in 2010. We've talked about it before on this show. In fact, Kalani Sitake, if we'll tie back the first segment in with this one, who was Utah's DC at the time, they together were trying to figure out like what they were going to do. And it even said here in the Deseret News article, which has a good breakdown of the story in the Golf Luncheon by Jay Drew as well. You guys can read it at thedeseretnews.com. It was about just details of the conversation. Like Witt and Sitake were genuinely very close to taking the Tennessee job. But according to the article, it does talk about where Kyle just said, he called Kalani one morning and said, hey, you know what? Like, let's just stay and make it awesome here in Utah. And Sitake said, yeah, it just felt right to stay. And I'm so grateful that he decided to stay, because it's easy to go chase that bigger job, the bigger opportunity. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. Like, Tennessee is a bigger job than the Utah job. But what Kyle Whittingham built here is a legacy that will last. And he could have easily gone somewhere else and maybe tried to give himself a better chance to win a national title. But he stayed, and he is going to be a legend forever because of that. Something Lane Kiffin just maybe he will miss and falls off a cliff, and it's like, oh man, we're just chasing the ghost of Kiffin. But I don't know, man. Those SEC fans don't forgive easily.
They do not. And to tie it back to Kyle Whittingham and talking about that, the potential of Tennessee job, man. You go back and, imagine they do take that job, right? Does Utah ever go back-to-back in the Pac-12? Does Utah ever make those Rose Bowls? Does Utah, find success and become one of the perennial teams in the Pac-12 and receive some of the national respect that they've earned right under Kyle Whittingham? There's so many variables there. And obviously, does Kyle Whittingham find the same success and build up Tennessee the way that he's built up Utah over the course of the last couple of years, right? There's so many variables there, but ultimately, I think things happened the way that they were supposed to happen, and Kyle Whittingham stayed, built up Utah. Now Utah's built up a little bit of a national reputation, right? They have a little bit of a national respect, and I feel like you saw that a little bit with this year's college football playoff rankings, right? Utah being ranked as high as they were early on, and that doesn't come with Kyle Whittingham. So again, I think Utah fans need to appreciate that loyalty. Whether he stays, whether he goes, it'll be he's a legend. He's a living legend for the state of Utah.
And some people might be listening to this and be like, well, the Tennessee job's not like the Alabama job in the SEC. Well, there was actually one point. There's a little movie called The Blind Side, which I think a lot of people have probably heard of. There's a scene in that movie where like all the college coaches come to visit the top ranked prospect in that movie. The top ranked recruit, I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. I think it was Orr or something like that. Yeah. And literally they all go, oh, when the Tennessee coach shows up, like that's how good that Tennessee job can be when it's firing at all cylinders. And Kyle Whittingham said, now I'm going to stay at Utah, which I absolutely love too. And really is just crazy, this whole saga too, Alex, because you see how toxic these things can get because Kiffin leaves and now he's taken coaches off his staff as well too. And we'll see all the recruits and everything that can flip too. So I think the thing that'll be interesting to see that could also affect Utah is, does this lead to the college football calendar being changed to where something like this couldn't happen? Let's say a Morgan Scalley takes over Utah, crushes it. He gets, just for, just spitballing here, he gets like the Ohio State job. I mean, it's not going to happen, but you know what I mean? Like some job where it's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to take that. I wonder if they will ever change the calendar to a point where it would say, you know what? We hate what this just did to Ole Miss. I honestly don't see how they're going to win a playoff game. I think Kiffin was that valuable to them. I think his play calling and everything, I actually would have let him stay if I was Ole Miss, just for the simple standpoint of he gives you the best chance to win. I understand why they feel like they couldn't do that because he's not choosing us, but that just their team is not as good right now. They've never been this good. They just hurt their chances to win a title. I wonder if this whole disaster and what it will do to the kids, the Ole Miss players who are completely getting penalized for all of this, which is so unjust and unfair. I wonder if that will lead to a calendar change. So if this were to happen at a Utah, we would be able to keep our guys, our coaches, our players in place for a playoff run, because obviously Ole Miss is struggling to do that right now, Alex. So I'm just curious to see if this will lead to larger changes.
Yeah, and I think because it is an SEC school, there's potential there for that to happen, right? Because let's say Ole Miss goes into the playoff, whether they're hosting or going somewhere for the first round of games, they go and they get the doors blown off of them, right? First game. I almost promise you, Greg Sankey's going to step in and say, we need to change this because we can't have one of our schools getting embarrassed on a national stage like that. It very well possibly could happen, and I think it should, because in a situation like, let's say, for example, UNT, right, makes a playoff. Right, they're in the championship game. That there's potential for them there to potentially make it to the college football playoff. I don't think they will, especially now with their head coach leaving. But let's say, right, for the sake of this argument, UNT does make a college football playoff. He obviously just took the job at Oklahoma State. The same thing can be said, right?
Yeah.
Can they perform the same without their head coach in the college football playoff? I don't think they will. No. I don't think they can. And so even just changing the calendar, even for like the smaller schools, I think in a situation like a G5 coach leaving, I think it would be massively valuable to that G5 school and just to college football in general to have some sort of, order is order. We I think fans across the country right now are need and want order, some type of order, and that could be a good start to it.
What's also just crazy is I look at what Tulane's coaches get. John Summerall is going to Florida. Florida's letting him coach the championship game this week and finish out his team with the playoff run. What a concept. You have like the same conference, but they're handling it differently. And that's where it was said, like, yes, Lane, he's leaving and he could have stayed to this place he's left. He deserves some blame too. But if I was Ole Miss, I would have let him stay. Because like I said, just to finish it through, I think the team is weaker. Like, what would you do, Alex, if you were them? Because I understand why they said no. Even Lane's like, I get it. But I just think they're a worse team now. And they're not some team that's ever done this before. First ever playoff appearance. And they're not as good today. So even if it means he's leaving at the end of the year, I feel like they should have kept him. What do you think?
I think there's obviously some people that are upset and some bitterness there from people who make those decisions. Like Keith, whatever his last name is.
Clark.
Keith Clark. There you go. Right. There's some bitterness. There's some saltiness there from him for Lane deciding to leave. And so I understand why that decision was made. But I think ultimately, like, you have a chance at something special here, something that's never been done at Ole Miss before. And you don't want to do anything to ruin that, anything to tarnish that. And so I think he probably should have let him stay, but I also see why he didn't and why that decision was made. And we'll see what Ole Miss is able to do, and we'll see how the committee decides to do with Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's a huge part of this too, to your point. Like, do they get dropped in the rankings? I don't know. I'm really curious to see how it shakes out. And I understand, like, some of you might be listening and going, this is Locked On Utes. How does this affect us? What I just said, this to me has the power to change this rule so that if Utah had an 11-1 season, like an undefeated season with Morgan Scalley, and all of a sudden Tennessee, whoever calls, and they're like, we need you right now. Like, I want to make sure Morgan, I don't think Morgan would leave. I'm not saying anything about him, but I want to make sure he could stay and finish this run. There's some things in place, it sounds like, that'll make it very hard. Like, not for Morgan, I'm just talking about basically telling a university you have to wait till the end of the year to make a head coaching hire. That's tough to do and enforce that, but I'm hoping that's what we get at some point. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But enough with the long-term future. Let's talk about the present right now. Utah in the CFP. Not looking the most likely, but we're still going to talk about it. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steak. Holidays are right around the corner, and doesn't it always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift? And Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to a family member or friend, Omaha Steaks delivered handcrafted perfection right to their front door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. I mean, Omaha Steaks are just super easy, right? And their variety is underrated too. It's not just the steaks, it's burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. It's one of those gifts that truly fits everyone. And the quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. Honestly, it's the kind of gift that brings people together and you don't need to figure out what anyone's size is, which can always be a hassle. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide, an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale, and for an additional 35% off. Use the promo code COLLEGE, all caps, no spaces at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See the site for details to get your holiday steak today. Oh, Alex, I want this Utah Utes team in the CFP so bad. Unfortunately, nothing went their way this weekend. This team is not making the college football playoff based on where they were ranked. They were the 13th ranked team coming into the weekend. Miami looked great. BYU got a win. Bama won. Notre Dame won. Oklahoma losing would have been nice. Wouldn't have knocked. I don't even know if they would have fallen below Utah, though. So Utah needed a lot to happen. Vandy looked really good. Like, Utah's looked shaky the last 2 weeks. Vandy could jump Utah. There could be a push for Texas to jump Utah. I don't think that should happen. Texas has a better win than us on their resume. So I think it's like Utah probably has a better chance of falling this week. I don't see any path for this team to make the college football playoff, and that hurts my soul to say about a 10-2 Utah team, but when you lose to the two best teams you play and you don't get in a Big 12 title game because of those tiebreakers, that's just how the cookie crumbles, and sometimes it crumbles like crap.
Yeah, I think that's the unfortunate part for Utah, right? To be on the doorstep of a potential Big 12 championship appearance and to be on the doorstep of a college football appearance after a 10-2 season. I know for Utah fans it'll sting, but also put it into perspective a little bit. You know, you bounce back from a 5-7 year last season. You've taken a step forward into establishing yourself in a Big 12 as one of the teams that can be and will be contending for a Big 12 championship over the course of the next couple years. And so I think that Utah fans should be very positive with how the season went, but I understand that, look, being right on the doorstep of and falling short of those goals, it's going to sting. But you're right, JT. At this point, with an Oklahoma win, with an Alabama win, with an Oregon win, with a Notre Dame win, right, with almost everybody ahead of Utah getting wins this weekend, I just don't see a possible path for Utah to sneak their way in anymore.
I don't. And this next thing I'm about to say hurts me to say as a Utah grad, someone who loves this team, hosted this show for a few years. Alex, I mean, the best teams get in. Utah doesn't look like one of the 12 best teams in the country right now. Like, whatever way you slice it, the defense is really falling off. Some of that John Henry Daly, some of that just these really good offensive lines, I feel like exposing it. If Utah had gotten into the Big 12 title game against Tech's probably winning that. They're a much better team than Utah right now. They already beat them once pretty good, and that Utah defense, man, like we said, they've just really tapered off. So against a really good team, I'd be worried about what happens. It pains me to say it. As like I already said, Alex, I don't even know if I want to say it again, but I don't think this is a top 12 team in the country right now. How do you view them?
No, the defensive performances the last 2 weeks have been very disappointing. I think the inability to stop the run. I mean, you give up about 800 rushing yards to the two Kansas schools in 2 weeks, and that doesn't scream playoff team, right? But like I said, I think that's okay because you've taken a big step into what the future of this program is going to be. Obviously, there's still the big leaguer in question, right? Is this Kyle Whittingham's last year? Does he come back? Does he not? But regardless, I think the foundation has now been built for Utah to potentially springboard themselves into being a playoff contender next season, into being a team that is going to be in the mix for one of those 12 spots. And so, again, just trying to put the season into perspective, it was a great season, but right now to finish the season, Utah did not play well enough to be considered a playoff team.
They didn't. Alex, I'm a little worried for next year. I still think this is a good Utah team. I think they will easily be one of the 6 best. I'm hoping one of the 4 best in the Big 12. They're going to probably lose all 5 of their offensive linemen, which was the best part of this roster. You hopefully get Beck back. You get still a great Morgan Scalley. Hopefully the defense gets better, but man, I'm nervous. I think it's going to be really hard for this team to be better next year than they were this year. I mean, what do you think?
I think that there's a good chance for them to be better next year.
Oh, really?
Yes. But it comes down to 3 questions. It comes down to 3 things. Obviously, 1, Kyle Whittingham. Mm-hmm. 2, the future of Jason Beck. Does he get any head coaching offers? Does he want any head coaching offers? Right? Does Jason Beck leave? I think obviously Jason Beck, Kyle Whittingham gave him an A+. I think a lot of fans are happy with where this offense was under Jason Beck under year 1. And so I think him sticking around would be massive to help Utah take a next step next season. So that's point number 2. Point number 3 is player retention. You have a really good young core right now. You have Daniel Bray, who's a freshman, Bert Ficklin, who's a freshman, Wayshawn Parker, who's a sophomore, JJ Buchanan, who's a freshman. Right, those are just the offensive guys.
Dan Pierce coming back.
Dan Pierce coming back. You have a young core, a lot of a veteran like Devin Dampier coming back, and so I think player retention and being able to recruit your own guys, right, from not going into the portal, I think will be massive for that. If those 3 things can fall in line for Utah, I think they have a really good shot of being better next year.
I think they do too. The one thing that's really interesting is this could be Kyle Whittingham's last week not as Utah's coach, I should say, because he's probably going to coach the bowl game, but there was reported by Alex Markham that he's been told of U Nation that Kyle Whittingham could inform the university as soon as Monday, December 1st, on his decision to retire or coach one more year. That's interesting. Like we talked about, Alex, I feel like this is going to be it. If I was the university, I'd also tell Kyle, hey, we're going to announce this now. We want to generate as much hype as in a bowl game as we possibly can, because bowl games' importance has never mattered less than in the 12-team playoff era. I think it's a better way to get Utah fans there. Let's send Whit off the right way. I would try to announce it ahead of time if I am Utah. As we stand here right now, as I said, Alex, I don't see him back next year. I think he's going to retire. What say you?
I'm still 50-50.
Okay.
I'm still 50-50 on the fence of whether he stays, whether he goes. But regardless, I know right now, like you mentioned, right now the bowl games are as meaningless as they've ever been because of the 12-team playoff. But Utah hasn't won a bowl game since 2017, the Heart of Dallas Bowl. And so if this does end up being Kyle Whittingham's last game, like, man, go out there and send him off with a massive win, no matter what bowl it is, no matter where it is. I think Utah has to go out there and win it for Kyle Whittingham, man.
They absolutely do, and hopefully they can when they get the opportunity. We'll find out where the bowl game is next week. A lot more content coming up on this week's show. Talk about what's going on with the transfer portal. We're probably going to see some guys announced with the regular season over for Utah. So a lot coming up here on this show. But Alex, please let everyone know where they can find you and more of your work at.
Absolutely. You can find all types of local Utah sports coverage from high school to the pros at KSL Sports, and you can also find me at Annapolis Alex.
Alex, thanks for hopping on.
Hey, thanks for having me on, JT. Always a pleasure.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking the latest in Utah athletics.